to start by saying the following. Now, not very many things you simply cannot say. There are a lot of things, however, on the first tier that people think they can say and rather enjoy boasting about not being able to say. There's sort of people, for instance, who say, you know, gosh, call me terribly politically incorrect, but, and then come out with something very triumphant that risks nothing, but they like to pretend it does. Then there is a level of things that have absolutely no risk around them, but people like to think they're brave warriors by saying it. Let me give you an example. The extraordinarily large number of idiots who in recent years have believed that by opposing, for instance, Dick Cheney, they encounter some kind of threat. By saying nasty things about George Bush, they're somehow being brave warriors, rather than saying something very, very obvious, easy to say, tedious, and often repeated. There was no threat to saying he thought that the President of the United States was a moron for 8 years. I thought it was not true myself, but there was certainly no threat to saying it, but I always liked the sort of idea that some people who did that kind of thing gave out, which is they were sort of sitting in a bunker fearful that Dick Cheney was going to knock on the door and shoot them like a lawyer. So there's that category, the pseudo difficult to say thing, which is actually orthodoxy. Then there are things that just are made difficult for you to say. Let me give you an example. As people know, fellow panelists will know, the Press Complaints Commission is a fantastic body for pretty much demonstrating what Encompasses' description of bad law is. That it's strong enough to detain the weak, but too weak to detain the strong. It's very good at tying you up in red tape and for somebody's written into them, so they found something you said offensive. The only appropriate response to which is, well, fuck you. I'm not bothered. You'd have no right not to be offended. And I'm annoyed that I have to write an explanation or go via a lawyer to explain why I didn't mean to hurt your feeling. The same Press Complaints Commission can do nothing serious about really, really serious breaches of the law. But anyhow, there are, however, things that do detain you on this one. I was decided one of these the other day when I discovered a case which came up and which I wrote about from my site on the Telegraph, which was the case of a man who had gone to a local council meeting in Kent. He was a union representative, a unison, if you would like to make a complaint. And he was at a council day, a Conservative councillor in Medway in Kent, that made the following appallingly bad joke. He's an Irishman walks into a pub, he sees his friend, and his friend has an empty glass, and he says, would you like another? And the man says, why would I want another empty glass? Now, this is a very, very poor joke. That, as you know, Rowan Atkinson said, the only response to a bad joke is not to laugh, the only response to a good one is to laugh. The idea that the law should be involved in either is grotesque. However, this man claimed that he had Irish descent and found the joke very offensive. Got thousands of pounds in compensation from the local council, and the councillor found guilty of saying this unfunny joke. And I said, this is grotesque. Our servicemen in Afghanistan bring home not much more than £1,000 a month to face incoming bullets from Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And this man got paid many more times that to face an incoming joke in Kent. And as a result, I said, well, why don't you they can't take us all, send in your Irish joke. For which self-appointed loud-mouthed Irish busybodies complained to the police and to the Press Complaints Commission and so on. So we've been tied up and irritating, apart from anything else a week on Irish radio explaining that I don't actually hate Irish people, I just think you shouldn't be fined for saying bad jokes. Anyhow, this was an example of something that just is a sort of tediously, you're not meant to say this, but you sort of can. There are very few things, finally, therefore, which do cause a problem, or which are hard to say. I think quite a lot of journalists who may agree in panel would find it difficult to say certain things if they're reporting from Russia at the moment. Indeed, I know a lot of journalists who have problems saying certain things about Putin and the regime in Russia. Certainly if they want to keep traveling there and so on. And I think people do weigh this up. A Palestinian journalist friend of mine always tells the story of a journalist he knew who would once have written something rude about Arafat, and who this friend had to stopped from being lynched in a bar in Mala some years ago, a decade after writing the article in question. There are places certainly where memories are long and people don't mind carrying out acts of retribution. But I think, to finish on, the biggest no-say of our time is, and somebody will know where I'm going, is about Islam. Because I take it as read that in a society where Elton John, for instance, can give another interview in which he sort of slips in something about Jesus being gay, with a sort of obviously publicity seeking, and luckily people don't really fall for it, or at least they fall for it by writing articles about the fact that this is obviously publicity seeking. But no one's really offended, really, but everyone, there's still a degree of sort of, oh, I'm saying something naughty, aren't I, bad. Well, I don't think anyone's going to come after Elton John. I think that people are fearful about saying things about Islam. I think they're very afraid of saying things about the facts around Islam, and non-Muslims and ex-Muslims in particular find it very difficult. And I'm sure I have the same sensation now as always happens when I say something is unsayable, as it were, which people get slightly concerned. But the fact is that for non-Muslims, Muhammad was a madman, or a lunatic, or a fraudster. These are the possibilities. But it is impossible that in the 7th century, in the middle of Arabia, an illiterate tradesman had bits of the Old and New Testament garbled to him by an archangel, which it didn't happen. Obviously not. Obviously not. The other things that is also difficult to say about Islam are the fact that Muhammad, as a male adult, repeatedly raped a 9-year-old girl, his last wife Aisha. That is very difficult to say for a lot of people. And I know people, several good friends who to this day live under 24 hours security for saying exactly this thing. Last night I was debating Tariq Ramadan in London with my friend and colleague Fleming Rose, who still lives under protection, for publishing in his newspaper in Denmark cartoons of Muhammad. I still find it amazing that in 2010 this could be the case. I think it grotesque. In October, 2 men were arrested in Chicago trying to kill Fleming again. And just last month, an axed man who had been sent from Al-Shabaab in Somalia came to ritually behead one of the cartoonists at his house in Copenhagen. I think this is a demonstration that it is deemed in this society, as in the Muslim world now, to be unsayable to say certain things that are perfectly obvious about Islam. I think we should say them. I don't think that means you always have to cause offense. But I think that people have to realize that by not expressing their opinions on this and other areas, any area, they make extremists stronger, they make our societal response to them weaker, and they do the worst thing of all, they censor themselves, and in the process they censor the truth.
Why the law?
Well, lots to cover there with Douglas Murray's opening statement in his debate with Mehdi Hasan, but just a few points I'd like to make. And what Douglas is saying is that it's basically open season on anything unless you start talking about the topic of religion. And if you try to criticize a religious faction, if you try to criticize Islam, if you try to criticize Judaism, if you try to criticize Hinduism or any of the religions out there other than Christianity, it's fair game. You want to go after a president of the United States, you can say all kinds of things, call him a moron, an idiot, a bigot, a racist, whatever you want to do, a cheater, a liar, a playboy, a misogynist. I mean, just whatever you want. You can, use the F word, you can drop the A word, you can do all kinds of things against presidents, politicians. You can make fun of, other prophets. You can make fun of Christianity. You can make fun of Christians. You can make fun of white people. That's all fair game, and nothing is going to happen. You do it, no one's going to go after you. No one's going to try to harm you. No one's going to try to, put you in jail. No one's going to try to sue you for slander, libel, defamation, none of that. But you start going after, and like he said, it's not, you're not a warrior. You're not courageous going after that because there's nothing's going to happen. But you start, talking about, the Prophet Muhammad, you start talking about, you know, maybe some of Moses, you start talking about some of the Hindu gods, or you start talking about any of those things out there. As he said, there are people that have published cartoons of, of Prophet Muhammad, and they have to unfortunately live with protection because there are zealots, there are Islamists, there are Muslimists out there. Now, personally, my opinion is that, you know what, listen, it's freedom of speech, freedom of choice. Unfortunately, like I said, is you have these people out there that feel that they have to commit acts of violence, or they have to, you know, um, stand up for the honor, and that should be completely condemned, absolutely 1000%. But unfortunately, we live in a world where you do have whack jobs, and you do have people that take these things and just can't discern that someone's got freedom of speech. If they say something, it might make you boiling mad, make you upset, make you just, whatever. But you got to learn to live with it and allow that person to speak his piece and just let it alone and don't let it fester. But that's basically what Douglas is saying, is that there are some things that that if you do say, there are some consequences out there that you've got to realize that if you want to go ahead and say those things, you can, but there are, nut jobs, whack jobs, people that are just absolutely crazy that take these things to such an extreme level that they start to believe that they need to do something against that person that's saying these things. So, anyways, let's go to the rest of the debate. Before we do so, just want to let you know you're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective of what's happening when you got social media, culture, religion, politics, and they all come crashing together. So let's go to some more of this debate between Mehdi Hasan and Douglas Murray.
It's not, well, first of all, it's not strictly true, you can say what you like in the United States, but that's a separate issue. But the United States is an interesting example.
Well, the Interfaith.
Well, Douglas mentioned the example earlier of Dick Cheney. It was very brave to say anything about Dick Cheney and George Bush, they wouldn't come to get you. Not true. Children in America wore T-shirts to school saying George Bush is an idiot. They were expelled from school. FBI agents turned up at their house. So it's not true to say that Bush and Cheney didn't crack down on anti-Well. Yes, I'm sure. Well, we live in the age of the internet. We're going to go right now.
If you advocated abortion in America, you might come in for.
Well, not you wouldn't be prosecuted. You might come in death threats.
Well, I'm referring to anti-terror laws that you've glossed over. I mean, that's the biggest, for me, that's a much bigger issue.
The abortion is very interesting because it's often brought up by people as an example of, for instance, this type of fundamentalism in America. People often cite, abortion doctors that are under threat in America and so on. What is striking about this is I think in the last 20 years, about 9 abortion doctors have been targeted by anti-abortion people. And in each of those cases, the person who threatened and who can attack was taken to court by the state, prosecuted, put in prison. So it's already, there are, you say, laws about incitement, there are laws that stop people doing harm to others. Now on the religious hatred subject, this is very important. Because what was attempted in Parliament in 2006 was precisely to stop people saying what they think about religions, even when it's true. This is a very, very important thing to bear in mind. Even if you said something true that could have offended somebody of faith, that would be illegal. Truth, in other words, is no offence. I hope you know what a serious situation it is when the state would pass such a law. It is true that Muhammad didn't hear any voices, just as it is true, in my opinion, that Moses didn't come down from any mountain with any tablets, and also true, in my opinion, that it's less likely that Mary was the first person ever to become pregnant without the insertion of a male member, and more likely that a young Jewish girl told a fib. I think all of these things are obviously true. I think that if you didn't like the fact that I think that, we can have a discussion about that. But again, the idea that the law could get involved when all three of these things seem perfectly obvious and true, I think is a problem. And a problem which maybe and others who have suggested such laws are a good thing have to consider.
Can somebody, either Douglas or Timothy?
So one quick point on what Mehdi Hasan was basically saying there, in terms of George Bush, that, children across the United States of America were wearing T-shirts that said George Bush is a moron, or George Bush is an idiot, or whatever, the anti-George Bush, anti-Dick Cheney T-shirts. And they were being visited by FBI and investigated, for a threat against the president. That's absolutely not true. I couldn't find anything out there on the internet that showed, children being visited by FBI or Department of Justice to investigate threats against President Bush because of wearing a T-shirt. Now, there was an instance where I believe it was in Boston or in the state of Massachusetts. I could be wrong, but somewhere there where a student did wear a anti-George Bush T-shirt. He was suspended, I believe, for the day or sent home. They said it went against the rules and regulations of wearing some type of, dress code or whatever, that it went against politics, religion, those kind of things or whatever in terms of that. Now, he did win in the Supreme Court, and they said, no, he is allowed to wear that. He had to duct tape some of the stuff inside there, but he continued wearing the T-shirt. He was allowed back the next day. That was the only instance I could find. But he won freedom of speech, which is what should have happened in the first place. But the school district, he had to sue and take the school district to court, which he should have done. The school district should have allowed. Now, I can understand in the school system, if you're going to wear something that's going to cause some, chaos, then it is up to the school. But that's such a fine line again. It's like, where do you decide? But they have school dress codes all the time at school. And you can say I have freedom of expression. I can come naked to school. I got freedom of expression. Why can't I wear, why can't I wear a thong? Why can't I wear, just a pair of underwears and a T-shirt? School's going to send you home. You can fight that in court, but you're probably going to lose even on the freedom of expression argument of freedom of speech. So there's that. And then to get to Douglas's point, Douglas, he's obviously anti-religious. So when he talks about that, it is obvious, it's true that, Moses didn't come down from, the mount, or Moses did, or, Abraham, didn't see, didn't sacrifice, his son, or was about to sacrifice his son. Moses didn't hear, the voice of God. The Virgin Mary, wasn't a virgin. That the Prophet Muhammad didn't, get the verses, from the angel, Gabriel. Angel Gabriel doesn't come down to, men and give them verses so that they can write it down from God. And he goes, this is obvious. This is so true. Those are his opinions. Those are his opinions. And we may not like those opinions, but those are his opinions. But sometimes Douglas does try to make those opinions almost as a matter of fact. And that's where people sort of start to say, what? And other people can counter that and say, I absolutely do believe that this happened. I absolutely do believe that God can speak to people. I absolutely do believe that God sends angels down to speak to men and to prophets, and to send his scriptures and verses down. I obviously do believe Adam and Eve, he would say there's no such thing as Adam and Eve. Nobody ate, from an apple and bit an apple, in terms of that. Anyways, let's continue.
Timothy, tell me what about those cartoons that is so important? Given that they offend so many more people than they please, can somebody just, I mean this non-facetiously, but because I want to know in case, What is it that is so crucial about those cartoons?
Can I answer that straight away? The reason was this, was that Fleming, the editor of the correspondent of General Boston, heard that there was a children's book publishing firm in Denmark who were intending to do a series of children's books about the major religions. And they had done one on Christianity, on Buddhism, so on. And they discovered that the one for children about Islam, which, like the others, was entirely offensive, this description of the history of religion for children, that they couldn't find an illustrator who was willing to illustrate the book. And they went around quite a number, and they all said, one of them went to the president anonymously and said, yes, I was thinking of Taylor McGraw, the murdered filmmaker. And as a result of this, Jean Poston realized that there was already a self-censorship in Danish society, and that self-censorship like that ought clearly, and I agree with this, to be broken.
But Douglas, what you're not telling the audience is that they were part of that self-censorship. 2 years earlier, they were offered cartoons of the Christ, and they said, we're not going to publish this because it will offend Christians.
Maybe that's not true. That's not true. I'll tell you what happened with that. There was a cartoonist who went to Jean Poston 2 years earlier with a cartoon. The editor said, we do not think that our readers would appreciate this. But what he meant was, and they have published anti-Christian cartoons. In fact, Fleming brought one along last night. No, they published ones before as well.
But before the Muslim cartoons, they self-censored on
No, they didn't. Let me just explain exactly. What happened was that this man came with a cartoon. The response, the standard Russia response was, we don't think our readers appreciate this. This is because they decided it wasn't a good cartoon. It wasn't because of its Christianity.
The Muslim ones.
No. It wasn't because of its Christianity that they didn't include it, because they had included and have since Christian cartoons that Christians would find offensive. And this, well, the point is this, that once you decided that there is something in your society you cannot say, once you decide that one religion can be ring-fenced from offence, can be protected and treated on a different level, I think you have a problem. And this is what Fleming and the others thought as well. It will be a problem if we treat Islam differently.
So do you campaign throughout Europe against Holocaust denial laws on the basis that Jews are getting special exemptions?
Let
Do
me
you?
explain it. Yes.
For consistency?
Yes, I'm against Holocaust denial.
No, on those terms. Do you go to Holland and Germany and do you say, I'm against these laws because you're giving Jews special protection?
Yes, of course. This is
Do you use that phrase? Because you're saying it's about Muslims getting special exemption. You're obsessed with Muslims. All I'm saying is, do you use the same language for Jews? Is Holocaust denial associated?
Well, folks, thanks for taking the time to watch. That was part 1 of that debate between Mehdi Hasan and Douglas Murray. We've got part 2. Check out our links there. We appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, like I said, and we've earned it, please subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. You know what to do. Check out our links above and below. I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.